Training Tip Tuesday. Now each week we're going to be taking one exercise and we're going to be breaking it down, looking at the movement, looking at how we want to be performing this exercise, and then from there we want to be understanding what we should be avoiding and how we can actually get the best bang for our buck with each exercise. Okay, the first episode we're going to be looking at is the dumbbell row. Okay, the dumbbell row is great for back width, but also back thickness. Okay, and primarily we're going to be looking at targeting the lats, although secondary muscle we will be looking at the traps, and we will also be looking at the biceps as well. Okay, now it's not to say that you're definitely going to grow your biceps from doing just a dumbbell row, but there is some research out there that's showing that potentially you can get some activation and it will help with development. Now primarily we are looking at the lats and the traps here, so we're going to be breaking it down a little bit more with the focus on those muscles. Okay, now the two kind of movements that we're performing here, we have shoulder extension, and we're basically bringing the elbow towards the midline of the body. So as we bring that elbow down and towards the body, that's called shoulder extension. And the second one we're looking at is scapular retraction, where our shoulder blades are coming together and we're going to be pinching, and we're going to be able to activate the traps a little bit more. So you can see here from the video that I'm getting the bench set up at around 45 degrees, and my upper body is set up at 45 degrees as well, so I'm staying relatively in line with the bench. Some videos will have you more on a flat position, some may have on maybe 15 to 20 degree incline, and the preference is more up to the person. What I really like about this position with the 45 degree angle is it really allows me to feel that the hand is underneath my shoulder when I'm starting, and from there I'm able to drag the dumbbell back towards my hip, which is what we should be looking at anyway. Okay, so from here the row is great for that thickness, but we've got to be able to target the lats effectively, and if we're not able to target those lats effectively, we're really going to struggle with our movement. So from here you can see that I'm bringing that dumbbell up towards my hip. I'm squeezing my back as hard as I can, making sure that I'm staying nice and controlled with the movement, and then from there making sure that I'm bringing it back and I'm hitting that 90 degree angle at my elbow. Okay, that's really allowing me to squeeze as hard as I can. The one thing you'll notice here as I'm going through the movement is I'm allowing my shoulder to drop slightly towards the floor. That's allowing me to get a full extension of my lats as I'm bringing the dumbbell down back towards the floor. A lot of time people will be too strict with this, but we'll cover that in a second. So we can see here that when I get set up, I take my hand onto the bench, I'm taking hold of the dumbbell, and from here I'm getting myself set up and I'm rowing on up towards the hip. But you can see here that my shoulders don't necessarily stay level. There is a slight drop in that right elbow. I keep saying elbow, but it's not, it's shoulder. So as we get into this, you can see that I've set the bench up at 45 degrees. I'm taking hold of the dumbbell, and from there I'm going to get up into my start position. And the big thing I love here is I'm setting my body up exactly the same as the bench at 45 degrees. I'm there from there, nice and controlled, rowing on up towards my hip. I'm pulling the dumbbell back, so I'm starting in line with my shoulder, and I'm drawing my elbow back towards my hip, and I'm squeezing. I'm getting that 90 degree bend in the arm, and I'm really focusing on pulling that dumbbell back towards that hip. Okay, this is allowing me to get a great squeeze of my lats. Some people will set the bench up at flat position, maybe a 15 to 20 degree position, and try and focus on getting that movement. The one thing you're going to see in a moment, when I get into position, I tend to take my hand onto the centre of the bench, and I'll take hold of the dumbbell and I'll bring it up into the top position. From here, when I row, I do tend to start with my shoulder or the arm that I'm working. The shoulder will be slightly lower than the hand or the shoulder position that's on the bench. Okay, from there I'm drawing my shoulder back, squeezing as I pull, and I'm rowing my elbow back towards my side. Okay, I'm really trying to get a good extension. The one big thing that I see here with a lot of people is they'll either be too strict with the movement, or they'll have too much movement in the shoulder, so there's too much of a swing. Now, the swing isn't necessarily a bad thing to have, because it allows people to get into a rhythm, but it'll also allow them to kind of increase their strength curve and actually be able to target their lats a lot more. Now, the one thing we always see is that people will struggle to kind of complete the rep because they can't get that full extension of their shoulder and the elbow to bring it back to get a good kind of stretch and kind of squeeze on the lats. So again, you'll see here that when we get into position, my left shoulder is slightly lower than my right, and I'm bringing my shoulder back and allowing my elbow to squeeze as hard as I can. Okay, this is only going to serve that we can get a good squeeze and we can actually make sure that everything is contracting effectively. Now, the one thing that I love about this camera angle here is you're going to be able to see my elbow rotate inward slightly and allow myself to squeeze even harder through my lats. So if I'm bringing my elbow straight back, it's a good squeeze, but what I like is the fact that I can bring my elbow and tuck my elbow in slightly and allow myself to squeeze my lats a little bit more and get a little bit more of a contraction. With the dumbbells here, I typically stay at least 80 to 85 pounds. I was always working in kilos back in the UK, and that was typically around 36, 38, 40 kilos for a desired rep range. Now, the one thing I will say about this is it can be used as a heavy compound exercise, or it can be used as an exercise to develop mind muscle connection. So we may be looking at maybe, I don't know, 6 to 8 reps, but we could also look at the high end where we could do 15 to 20 reps as well. Now, because you're going to be doing single arm here, or this is a single arm row variation, that we may want to work on the weaker arm first. So for me, it's my left side. I work on my left side first and then switch to my right, but it might be variable for you. So the one thing that I will always look at in terms of common errors is people will perform the movement with too much momentum, so a lot of swaying and a lot of swinging from the upper body to try and bring that dumbbell up to the top. Like I mentioned a minute ago, it can be actually really beneficial to get a little bit of momentum from the shoulder, like you saw in the video there. There was a couple of my reps where I wasn't performing the exercise with perfect kind of momentum, and I was a little bit too strict, and that can actually hinder how kind of effective you row. The second thing that I always see is that people will go too upright with their row, so they may use the dumbbell rack as kind of the support. Now, I was at 45 degrees and I typically won't go any higher than that, but what you may find is if you go up to say 60 degrees, or you're using the dumbbell rack and you're a little bit higher than that, you're not allowing yourself to get a full stretch of the lats, and you're not going to allow for that full range of motion and that extension of the shoulder to get a good squeeze on the lats at the top. Okay, so you may potentially be missing something in terms of performance or kind of growth out of the lats because you're not utilizing that full range of motion. Okay, and the final one I mentioned a second ago is people tend to be too strict, so they tend to keep the shoulders very still and they don't allow much movement, and it can actually hinder their potential growth. Okay, the reason for that is they're not allowing them to get a heavy enough weight because they're focusing on being too strict. Okay, so one thing we want to look at is being able to get that full range of motion, bringing that elbow back and getting that good kind of squeeze through the back as well. Okay, that is all for this video, folks. I hope you enjoyed the content. I hope you've learned or taken something away from this video and you can apply it into your own exercise. So go ahead and give the training tip video a like. Get out there and practice the dumbbell row with those tips that we've given you here today, and I'll see you all next week for another Training Tip Tuesday. Peace out.